But anyway,
No
Matt, it
problem.
is wonderful to have you join us on Advancing Your Photography. You're in Brooklyn. I recognize, boy, that's been a tough situation there for you guys, and I feel for you, and I hope you're staying well and safe. It looks like you are.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but for us, it's not too bad. For those who are in essential roles, it's really difficult, I'm sure. It's scary out there at the moment, but it's safe in here, and I'm glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's the point of this show. We are in a safe space, and we're going to talk about something creative, which is really important. And I think we're just going to dive in, but I am going to ask you this one question. You
Please.
are passionate about your work, but what do you feel is that primary point of passion for you?
Uh, of all the things I do for work, what do I enjoy most? Is that essentially
Yeah,
what you
I
mean?
would say so. Like what's kind of the, what's gets you up in the morning and drives your, your enthusiasm towards photography, I guess
Hmm.
is what I'm saying.
So, from the creative side of things, about what I love about the craft of photography, I've always, well, if I'm totally honest, I first fell in love with the gear. I was a little gear whore from
Okay.
the very beginning, getting hand-me-down cameras from my dad and grandmother. I loved the equipment. Um, but, since I was a teenager through to now, I still just love the best thing about photography for me is that moment when you're lining up a shot and just before you click the shutter, you know you've got something special. You've got a great shot lined up. You know your settings are right. This is a great moment. And the feeling as you push the shutter, it's almost like that moment of chasing the shot is even better than the final image for me. So that feeling is still the most satisfying. Now, of course, doing it as a business, what gets me up in the morning is an alarm clock an hour before I would like to be awake
I
so
hear
that I
you.
can work through the mountain of tasks that I need to do. But that's still the big motivation in terms of inspiration.
Fantastic. Matt, I'm just been told that we didn't hear the intro, so I'm going to back up here, you guys, and give you this intro of our fantastic guest here. This is Matt Granger. He's a portrait photographer, tour leader, photography educator. He's passionate about sharing his love of photography, which is why he's with us today. He's also a passionate professional photographer. We're going to be talking about these images here in a minute. He specializes in all things people related, and he's been published extensively in Australia and abroad. And he has a very popular YouTube channel and Instagram that you should be checking out. So, without further ado, Matt, we're going to continue on our road this morning.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. So, why don't we dive right in? I do have a selection of your images. The first
Okay.
one is the geisha who's
hmm
preparing. Tell us about that image.
So I can cheat a little bit and say I actually just put a video live 24 hours ago on this experience. So if people want to see more detail, they can jump over to my channel once
Oh,
we're done.
good. Excellent.
Um, so I have a long history with Japan, and I have a lot of Japanese family growing up. We hosted about a dozen exchange students, and a lot of them were Japanese students over for English language learning.
Wonderful.
And one in particular is essentially a second sister for me now. She lives in Australia. We're really close. And I run photography tours to Japan. Um, and on my tours, I try to take the guests along. We go during a festival that revolves around geishas and that tradition. We're in Kyoto at the time. So we have the opportunity to take them along to a Maiko performance, which is basically an apprentice geisha. And long story short, after years and years of trying to set something up, I was able last November to arrange to attend a real non-touristified geisha evening that my Japanese sister's father arranged for himself and his business friends and invited my wife and I along. It was our 10-year wedding anniversary. So through I can't tell you the amount of time. This was just a personal passion thing. It's
Yeah.
not for a commercial thing, but it was years of planning to come together. an exorbitant amount of money. But after all of that's done, probably my one of my highlights of photography to date. I was able to join as she did her whole makeup, getting dressed with her assistant, dressing her in the kimono and the whole rituals and all of that. It was, it felt like something that you normally, even Japanese people don't get the opportunity to have a dinner with a geisha, let alone spend one-on-one time or see them getting ready like that, let alone photographers, let alone tourists. So I had 3 or 4 translators in the room, and it was a whole big to-do. But once we were there, the geishas are above everything else. They're masters in conversation and kind of social life. So it was just so comfortable and warm, and it's amazing. If you get a chance to spend time with the geisha or Mako, you feel like the most important person in the room the whole time. They're just masters of working the room.
That is their job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Matt, looking at composition, I love the layers. And what's interesting, how you layered it, it's all about her. All layers are her, essentially. But that's very clever how you have the two mirrors giving us a foreground, middle ground, and background of the same person. That's
Yeah, I shot the heck out of this scene. I have so many different variations, including behind the mirror shooting to her, and then behind her was her assistant,
right.
just in waiting. So I don't even remember on this one. I was shooting with 3 different camera bodies at the time. I don't remember which one I took this one with. I was shooting with 2 Sonys with autofocus and a Leica manual focus.
Oh, nice. Which Leica, by the way?
That was the M10P.
And oh, brilliant. Okay, well, that do you think that's why we're looking at a black and white, because you shot it with the Leica, or is it something you did in post?
No, I did it in post, and in this case, it was just to do with. So first of all, the Leica I'm using, and I have no affiliation with Leica. The M10P is a color camera.
Okay.
I do have a monochrome camera from them as well, an old one. But so that all the cameras I had the capability to capture color and were capturing color.
Gotcha.
This one in particular, I wanted it to be in and to focus all of the attention. Basically, the strongest point I wanted to be her sharp face, and I say undergarment, but it was a robe. But the garment she was wearing to get dressed was quite colorful, and the color I felt was distracted because her face was already painted perfectly white, so it was almost featureless. She was repainting eyes back on, essentially.
I see.
So the color version of this, her face was kind of lost.
Makes sense. Okay, and now we're going to a completely different location. The girl in a walkway, beautiful angle. What's the story here?
So that's actually Japan as well.
Okay.
That was just a young student who was doing modeling in her part-time, and we did a series of shoots. It's not super close, but it's not too far from the other location. This is also in Japan. She was, I think, an international student, but we brought along a few different outfits. One of them was a kimono, and did some shooting in and around the train station. And this is a famous walkway inside the Kyoto station.
Right.
Kyoto station? I think it was Kyoto. It might have been Osaka. But she had this bodysuit that she wanted to shoot in, and I just thought the long leading line with the exoskeleton kind of gave a Metropolis type vibe to it. Funny that you chose these two to go after each other, because 20 minutes before this, she was dressed in a kimono,
wow,
doing traditional shots on the street, and then she just, we switched out for this kind of matrix-y type shot.
What a change. A matrix shot, exactly. You know what also I find interesting, Matt, given the number of people in Tokyo, there's nobody apparently in this walkway. How did you pull that off?
So this one, this wasn't Tokyo. I can't remember if it was Osaka or Kyoto, but just a matter of timing. So we were at the end of one corridor. There may be someone hiding in there in the distance, but they by her knee.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a matter of timing. So this particular station has a huge long walkways that are, maybe a couple of 100 feet long, suspended in the middle of the air, above this cavernous station. So, going in the middle of the day, timing it between people walking back and forward, it wasn't too difficult. This wasn't like on street level or something. So I'm sure we
Gotcha.
waited a few minutes to get a clear background.
One of my heroes, photography, I've written about him in my books, is Henri Cartier-Bresson, and he's always about geometry, and this has got so many geometric shapes in it. There's so much geometry in this, angles and the curves and straight lines and leading lines. They're all there. It's amazing. So that's well done.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to. I think we're in Bhutan. You said when we were talking about this earlier, the woman in the market.
Yes. So I'm not looking at the shot right now, but I remember this one. It's with an ultra wide angle lens, a 12
Yeah.
or 15 mil lens. I have been fortunate to go to so many different countries and markets. So often, especially on the fresh fruit markets on the market day, can be such a rich place to capture normal interactions of locals and the sellers, and also it tells a lot about the people to see the kind of foods that they eat. So here you'll see in the foreground there's a whole bunch of chilies, for example.
Yeah.
In Bhutan, chilies are treated as a vegetable, not as a spice. So they will use it in the same way we might put a potato in our stew. They'll put a dozen chilies, ranging from mild through to, as my guide calls them, bum stingers. But
Bum
it's
stingers. I love
the,
that.
the national vegetable.
So you have
So,
to be careful when you're eating their food if you're gonna bite into one of those and think it's a potato or a pepper, a non-hot pepper. That would be quite a shock.
yeah, I don't know if I mean, Thailand is also crazy hot, some dishes, and parts of
Yeah.
southern India, I know, but it varies from totally fine, even for an Australian palate, not too spicy, through to exceptionally spicy, things that they thankfully don't give to visitors too much. But you can see behind her on the right, I am able to see the pictures now. Thank you for that. There's another cellar. It's a big
Oh
open market.
yes.
So to kind of get a clearish shot of her was to stand over the top and shoot down. Otherwise, you had layers of people going back, which, can tell a story, but it's a bit harder to
Yeah.
isolate on a person and have a depth of field that shows the produce and the person.
It's a really great compositional tool, Matt, to obviously the point of view. And that's something to remember, you guys out there. Don't always shoot, from your own eye level because you've got every number of angles and positions. In this case, this works brilliantly because not only do we see her, but we see her layout and then the guys behind her. And I think that's the only way you really could have captured that effectively. So that's awesome.
Thank you. And yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the best techniques for people, especially with travel. Whatever equipment you have, whatever country you're in, don't just stand straight up
Really.
at 5.5 or 6 foot tall. Choose every shot you've shown so far. I was either squatting or laying on the ground or camera in the air. The shots will look like they were from your eye, and if that's the look you're going for, that's fine. If you're shooting everything in a reportage style, but if you want to get a unique shot, just changing your vantage point is so powerful.
Absolutely. Okay, now we are looking at the temple, and you also mentioned what's on your link there from Bhutan. What's going on? This is
Mhm.
gorgeous.
This was a total luck shot, to be honest. This is in kind of in the center of the country, in a town called Bumthang, which is one of the bigger cities away from the capital and the airport. And each administrative district, you call them states, I guess, in another country. The central, and Bhutan, for those who don't know, is incredibly mountainous. It's just mountains and valleys. So there's
Right.
only, I think, 3 valleys in the country that are wide enough to have a runway. So that's why there aren't many airports there, because you just can't get
Yeah.
10 meters of wide, flat space. But so each area will have a zong. which is, you kind of call it the municipal building, but in Bhutan, they're a fortress that is both the local government and the monastery. So the monks live there. In Bhutan, it's a kingdom, but the religious head and the king are equal leaders. Well, and now they actually have a prime minister who's democratically elected. But so that's the Bumtang Zong, which is one of the most important ones in Bhutan. And I was on the main street of town. This was about 6 p.m. The sun was setting. The clouds are pretty much just as you saw them. Yeah. And for this one, I climbed on top of like a 5-foot concrete wall with an 85mm lens. I think just below the frame there was power lines and the buildings of the center of town. And again, I've got the camera up in the air to get, and this was with the Sony with the tilting down screen to be able to get the composition. And that's not cropped. That's the 85mm frame that was just fortunate to get enough of the dramatic clouds, and that's a huge fortress, so it kind of shows you it being
that's
quite
fantastic.
Small.
And once again, changing your vantage point, Ansel Adams had a Cadillac station wagon with a roof rack on the top of it that he could climb up and put his camera on top of this station wagon. And so that would give him like 6 or 7 feet above the ground, so he could completely change his vantage point just as you did with this shot. So again, yeah, you're up above all this, the power lines and whatever else is going on. Very good tip, Matt, to remember to do that. Just, our best friends as photographers, I'll have to dig up who made this quote, but your best friends are your feet. And in this case, your ability to move around. So that's brilliant. Okay, now we are looking at the blue tarps and snow. Where is this?
So this would be another one of my highlights from my travels. The first international tour I was leader for was to Peru, and my tour partner and I started going to this festival that basically you don't see any non-South American guests at, because it's so high in altitude. We needed to take a couple of days to get to the foothill city, acclimatize, and then take donkeys to get up to the actual festival. It's called the Coyuridi Festival, and it's an Andean festival. I say Andean because the people who live through the mountains in neighboring countries, it's amazing. I don't know how this actually works, and I don't mean this as disrespect, but in Peru, time and deadlines are kind of a loose thing sometimes.
Sure.
A meeting at 10 a.m. doesn't mean 10 a.m.
Yeah.
But somehow this festival, people leave their homes in, Chile and Peru and wherever, not Ecuador, but wherever, and just walk to this valley high up. I think it's like 14,000 feet, something like that. And they just arrive on the right day. And then it's a week-long, 24-hour-a-day festival. And it's kind of a dance competition. So each community has been rehearsing all year performances, and they kind of are having a dance off, as crazy as that sounds. Not like, break dancing, but traditional Andean dancing. So anyway, we were in this valley, all kind of puffing, barely able to get enough oxygen. And there was a crack of thunder and a storm rolled in. And when you're up in the mountains like that, thunder sounds like the end of the world. It's rumbling all around you. And then the snow suddenly opened up, and out of nowhere, I don't know how, to get anything there, because there's nothing there really except a church. People who were selling soft drinks had to carry the crates of soft drink up 3,000 feet from the base camp. So someone had the foresight to bring miles of blue plastic, because out of nowhere, when the snow came, all this tarpaulin just came out, and suddenly everyone was hiding. And that was a woman under her cap, looking at us. We were lucky and took shelter in one of the structures there. One of the families was cooking for their troop and let us join them. So, yeah, that was the one shot I got before she put her hat down and put her tarp back up.
That's capturing the moment. Absolutely. What I love about, I love a lot of things about it, but also the snowfall. It looks like you had a fairly long exposure because we can see the motion of the snow. Do you remember what that was?
I don't. I know it wasn't, it was relatively low light situation, even though it was in the daytime. So I don't
Yeah.
think it would have been slower than like a 15th or something, but I really don't remember.
Yeah, but okay, that makes sense then. So the blue, and I love the fact that we just see her peeking out at you. She's looking at you, and
Yeah.
of course the colorful guy behind her. That's just absolutely brilliant. A lot of contrast too, which is great, and another compositional tool, contrasting her face and the hat against the blue, and that
Which was
really works
more
well.
more good luck. Yeah,
Good
it was
luck,
good luck.
yeah.
It's
And those
blue and
colors do complement each other, which is
yeah, yeah.
also another point of luck. Fantastic. Now we're going somewhere completely different. The woman with the gas mask. What's happening here, Matt?
Now that's not near. It may look it, but it's not nearly as exotic or exciting of a story.
You could
That
fool me with
is,
that.
that's my good friend Kay. Back when I was living in Sydney, Australia, we were looking for some interesting places to shoot, and there was an abandoned orphanage in, where was it? I forget the town, somewhere between Sydney and my hometown. I had read about this place that had, all the doors removed and no fences, and it
Uh
looked like
huh.
it had this amazing stage. And we had all of these props, including the gas mask, which is, seems more fitting in this virus era. But it
Yes.
wasn't an overall theme we were going for. But where she's standing, when we got there, it had like 3 or 4 inches of pigeon poop just covering the ground.
I see all that
So,
dirt there, so this is
well,
pretty
that's
interesting.
after we had cleaned it up. So
Oh,
we
you
got
cleaned the poop out and
indoors and
then okay, left all the
but
dirt.
then there was dust everywhere, so she ran and grabbed a mask to smartly shelter herself. I don't
Oh
know if any
yeah.
had a filter in it, and then that was just the shot. But the interesting thing on that one, like we'd been planning to go and do this shoot for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we spoke to the caretaker whilst we were there. Like a week after we shot, and we actually filmed this as well, some arsonists burnt the whole place down. So that
Whoa.
orphanage is gone now. Yeah,
All the pigeon poop with it too, and the graffiti and
yeah, it
her
was probably that was
dirt
probably
and
good Tinder for it.
yeah. Well, listen. One thing I really want to point out here. I like to break this point of like the rule of thirds. Is something you always. It's a rule. It's not a rule of any kind. It's a guideline, and of course you are not following it. And if you had, it would have totally changed the composition here because you have her pretty much in the center,
Yeah,
which is the only. I mean, that makes sense. It totally works that way.
yeah. Well,
So
it depends on the shot, right? And at some point, you have to just trust your eye. I'm sure if you got the shot of the woman in the walkway from earlier,
yeah,
and draw a Fibonacci spiral that would,
you could probably
I
do.
had followed some technique. To be honest, I rarely do put a person's face dead center in a shot like that.
Yeah,
But here, with the four windows and the arch, it seemed to balance
it's
best.
perfect. Even the center of the arch, there's a line there, and the windows, and that seems like the absolute right place. But that's the point I make often is that composition doesn't have rules. It has guidelines or things that you can
Hmm.
sort of like recipes that you can start with, but you shouldn't worry about busting out of the recipe. It should be
Yep.
something that you intuitively feel where's the right place to put my subject in this image. Okay, so here we are. I love this image, and I believe you said this is in East Africa. Oh, Ethiopia. There we are. The little girl in Ethiopia. Fantastic. Tell me everything about this.
So there isn't a great story behind this one. I'll just share in the chat a link to the gas mask. There's a YouTube video on that from that
Oh,
shoot as
good,
well.
good.
So we were, we try to work with operators in countries that are able to get you right into a community. So we were in this one, we had just stopped off at a village and were taking a walk through. In Ethiopia, they're a little bit more formal about it. And when you go from region to region, you kind of need to hire a local guide to join your national guide. It's not a formal thing per se, but if we want to go in and see a tribe, it's better that we hire someone who grew up in that tribe to take us around, as well as our guide who is looking after us for the 2 weeks. So we were just doing a walk through, through the leaves and whatnot. You can barely see it here, but she's actually standing in this lush greenery with like leaves 6 foot long, these giant green
Oh,
leaves.
wow.
And she was there was an arch of foliage behind her, which was giving her this wraparound. That's why she's got a seam of shadow down the front of her face. And I got, I think, 2 shots on this one before she giggled and ran away. She just kind of emerged from the plants to see what these strangers were doing. I got the shot, she giggled and ran. And I converted this one, to be honest, to black and white. One, I think it's pretty, but 2, the wraparound of green light gave it the weirdest color haze that I just couldn't
Oh,
get
I
the
see.
skin tone. I couldn't get the skin tone to look nice, so I went black and white.
It just got this great feel to it, the sort of halo of the blown out background. And
Yeah.
why was that background so blown out? It was just all
Well,
reflecting?
she was backlit through, the light was only coming through the foliage,
Oh,
so
I
I
see.
overexposed it about 2 stops to get the shot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, now we're looking at the guys also in Ethiopia in the tree. 2 guys.
Yes. Okay. So this was another village. I think this was, I don't remember exactly which part of Ethiopia, but it was one of the villages that gets more tourists, and it can be a little difficult sometimes when you first go to work with communities. You want to do it in the right way. So now we've been going a while. We'll go to communities, deal directly with the elders of the village, and make a donation to the community, and then just spend the day without it being so transactional. But in this particular village, when they see the car pull up, the kids run wanting to get some candy or that kind of thing. So this was one of the few shots I got of the kids sitting in the tree. Actually, just down behind them was a fall off of like a foot from the base of the tree was the edge of a cliff that led down to the Omo River.
Wow.
And this was, actually, there's probably too long of a story to get in here, but this part of Ethiopia has a extra meaning for me. There's an orphanage we work with there because of there's some traditions where some children still get sacrificed even through till today. So
Ooh.
shots of children from this part of Ethiopia have an extra level of meaning for me personally. But in terms of the shot, I just like the stark contrast. It was kind of a hazy day, so it worked to,
Yeah.
again, make it a black and white. And yeah, it was as simple as they were sitting in the tree, hadn't noticed us pull up before I noticed them and got the shot, and they climbed down to run over and say hi.
What time of day do you think that was, Matt?
I am going to say probably like 2 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So
Okay.
kind of maybe 45-degree
Yeah.
hard sunlight.
Well, that's a good example of, that's a very challenging time to photograph. And you made it work because you don't have harsh shadows on their faces. You have, obviously a lot of light, which is bringing about the contrast with the trees and the background. So that proves that you don't have to just photograph in the golden hours to get a good image.
Well, no, you have to be opportunistic though. So
Yes.
in situations like this, and for some of the tribe situations that we were shooting, Ethiopia is, I think, the best people photography of anywhere I've been in the world. But you just go at the time of day that you're welcomed and can get in. So
There you go.
a
That's
lot
what you
of
get.
shots that I don't end up using because I just couldn't get a candid shot with their face in the right direction. Here, this shot was luck that they were looking and had a nice direction of light on them relative to where I was. If it were a shot where they were going to hang out there for half an hour, I might have moved around to get a different vantage point on them. But this one, I think, was luck.
Yeah, well, you have to get it when you get it. You guys, we're going to look at a few more of his images, and then we're going to take some questions. So if you start thinking of your questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll pick them up in just a minute. So we have another Ethiopian boy with a scary-looking rifle here. I'm guessing it's not an American-made rifle. It looks definitely foreign.
So this was it's one of the idiosyncrasies of Ethiopia that men in different parts of the country, one will, so he's the latter, but one will wear lots of adornment, beads, beautiful things in their hair, feathers, things that we might consider being kind of feminine, as a way of showing their masculinity. And another, as a leftover from what's going on in Sudan, there are a lot of machine guns that have come into the country, sometimes working, sometimes not. But young men in some parts of the country carry them as a fashion accessory, basically.
Really?
But that is most likely an AK-47 that works.
Yeah. You think it is working? Okay. I was kind of guess.
I don't know. There's some do, some don't, but they're not involved in the conflict, but they are left over from conflicts.
The sweat dripping down his face, and the whole thing is really fantastic.
And so we had passed him and I think a couple of his brothers on the side of the road and stopped to chat with them. And I think I just chose my vantage point to be neutral, giving him, the direct sunlight. So you can see the far side of his face is in shadow. And we've got some, nice, softer, warm tones in the background. And it just was, 100 degrees. So that was just sweat.
It just sweat coming out.
It may look like he's in drill training or something, but it was just, walking to town.
Just the heat. And, of course, the shallow depth of field takes care of that background, so that's wonderful. And then let's...
I think that was a shot with a Leica, maybe with the Noctilux.
Okay. Yeah. And now we have the black and white with the man with the hoop rings and painted face.
I have to wait for that one to load. I'm not seeing it just yet, but I think that's a woman, actually, very fierce woman. That part of Ethiopia, it's quite common to put those extensions. It's funny, you see it was kind of a trend. So you can't actually see her ears here. So that's all wrought iron headdress. But a lot of the women do have the big disc in their lip and disc in their ears. And I think she did have torn earlobes from having had the discs in the past.
Oh, it looks like it. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. So this was, again, 100-degree weather, and she was wearing an outfit basically made of steel. It was real Mad Max kind of thing. But her and her husband or her family were cattle herders, giant bulls. I think there may be one of those shots in here, actually. But so she was on the side of the road and incredibly intense. This was the same trip, probably just a few days after that young boy with the machine gun.
That is the most noticeable thing to me, is her expression is so intense. And of course it's augmented by the paint on her face, the whole thing, but it's definitely, she looks very intent or intense. So that's a wonderful capture by, getting that moment when whatever she's looking at, you're capturing.
And speaking of our point before, I'm pretty sure this was another direct sunlight situation, but by putting the sun directly behind her, she's in really quite soft light. We've got a little bit of wrap on her temples, but, this was one I could take a little bit of time, choose my vantage point, wait for the right kind of a gaze. And for those at home who are maybe wondering, every country's different, but in Ethiopia, we don't just run in, steal people's photos, and then leave again. We're always making some kind of a contribution. It's not so transactional as $1 a photo or something like that. But we don't just stop the car, wind the window down, take photos, and keep going. We would have stopped and interacted with her and her family and had a chat via our translator for 20 minutes or something.
That's a point that Ed Kashi made when we were talking with him of just don't just rush in and try to, you're not going to get the photograph you want. You do have to get to know the people a little bit and find out what they need, what they want, and make your way accordingly.
And if you're not on assignment, even as someone who's a diehard photographer, enjoying the moment at the time, I think is at least as important, probably more important than going home with the photo.
So true.
So running in, cameras blazing, and ruining the atmosphere of your visit to this community isn't worth it to get the first or the best shot. Going in and actually learning about them and having an interaction with them is the best. And if you can leave with photos, that's great as well. Having said that, the shot of the boys, like I said, I did get that shot before we had actually greeted them. But there's other ones that just happened to be the one we chose out.
Yeah. That's a very good tip, Matt. And I was going to ask you about it, travel tips, and you just gave one, which is you should be enjoying the moment and you should be enjoying what you're doing as well. And taking in, that's why you traveled there. So it's a separation of hats as photographers. Sometimes we're going off by ourselves and very intent upon getting the photograph, but we're also at that time you're visiting and you're around other people and you want to interact with them as well.
Yeah, and the thing I always go back to, so for us, she's fascinating. She's wearing something that in all my travels, I still hadn't seen someone wearing quite something like that. She scared the sugar out of me. Sorry, I don't know if you have swearing on your channel. She
sugar.
Was so intense.
we allow sugar.
That's I'm allowed to.
Deep into the show, Matt, you can say whatever you want.
Okay, well, I'll do my best. But
those are YouTube.
What I try to keep in mind is, as interesting as she is, how would I feel if people came to my house and just were sticking cameras in my face? I wouldn't put up with it.
Right.
So as important as the shot is to me, not being a jerk is really important as well.
Hear, hear. That's the human side of being a photographer. Otherwise, not only do you spoil it for yourself, but you spoil it for the next guy that comes along trying to get a photograph.
Yeah, as a tour operator, that's something I'm always trying to think about, that I have to balance what I want, more importantly, what my guests want, but also, what's good for the community and not ruining it. There's some things that we go to that I just don't share because I don't want it on the tourist map.
Yeah.
And the people don't want it on there. We got in because a friend's cousin, someone is from the town and invited us. But I'm never going to tell you where it was because they don't want a tour bus arriving and it would ruin it for everyone involved.
I'm with you on that. I'm a surfer and we feel the same way about our secret surf spots. If we start telling everybody about them, they're no longer secret. And instead of 3 guys in the water, there's 300. That sort of spoils it for everybody. Let's do one more and then we'll take a couple of questions. So this is the boy with a mohawk kind of thing, bright colored shirt, and the amazing reflection in his eyes.
So this again is Ethiopia, and you see the interesting haircut that he has. That's part of the fashion down in southern Ethiopia. So you see the color cast we've got coming from the grass here. That's what I was struggling with. That young girl. From Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Here it wasn't as intense. For her, it was all wrapped around, and I found it difficult to get that color cast out. From memory, this shot was at a cattle sale. We timed to be in this town when the weekly or monthly cattle sale is on. And again, it's jarring. It's very culturally different, the way people interact with animals there. It was actually there's lots of funny stories from that day. I was traveling with my friend who I run the Peru tours with, and one of the bulls escaped and was kind of charging and bucking around the yard, and all of the locals ran and climbed up the fences and were clear. Fortunately, I was behind the gate, but he turned to run and fell straight into a big pile of shit, unfortunately. His
Ouch.
wife was screaming, and through the rest of the town that day, the people were pointing and laughing and saying, "Ah, Johnny fell, Johnny fell, Johnny fell." But this was a young kid who was just standing on the edge of the market watching the cattle sales. And if you can see it, he does have scarification and shaving in his eyebrow, which is still common there.
Oh, I
Scarification
see
as a
that.
beauty ritual
Wow.
um, on people's backs and eyebrows. And yeah, there's all kinds of without going into that topic too much, there's body scarring and genital mutilation still
Ouch.
practiced in that part of the country. Yeah.
And what is causing the reflection in his eyes?
Good question. I think we're just in the shade and he's looking into the central area where there was in bright sunlight
A lot of
and it's just
reflection
the
going.
ground bouncing back. Yeah, yeah.
That gives him
So he would have been in shade.
a really interesting feline kind of look in his eyes. That's pretty remarkable.
It's the
Matt?
same technique as the girl, really. He was not directly lit and in shade himself, so overexposing the shot blows out the background and brings up that what was the only directional light coming
Yeah,
to his face, the reflection. Yeah.
excellent technique. I am going to. I'd love to keep going. We're going to take a few questions. This isn't a question, but I like this. Jared said, "Quote of the day: quote, not being a jerk." Here, here. We don't
It's
want
good
to
to
be jerks
aspire
when
to.
we're out there photographing. So, someone actually asked this question: with all the shutdown, what do you really wish you could go out and shoot right now?
I miss it all, to be honest, and I can't complain. We've got it so good, our setup. It's not too difficult a situation, so I'm not complaining. Ordinarily I should have just wrapped a tour in Laos. I had a tour group that was meant to be the 10th to the 21st of April. So right now I would have been in Bangkok with the guests after the trip or on my way back here. So I missed that. We missed the Lao New Year festivals. The water festival is what we would have been there shooting. And then when I'm not on the road leading tours, I tend to be either catching up on things in studio, which I'm now all caught up. Thank you. I would love to go back outside again,
Yeah,
or having people come in for shoots and doing work, having my team come up to do YouTube stuff. So I the thing day to day that I'm missing the most now, of course, going out to restaurants and being able to travel is something, but having, to be able to just go for a walk with my wife and shoot as we wander around Manhattan on a weekend I miss that as much as going to Laos. I also, my muse and friend Steph, we haven't been able to get together to shoot anything for YouTube for a month now. My editor Jonathan can't come in, so rather than a particular thing that I'm missing to shoot, it's just the interaction with other people.
I hear
So
you.
that's for having me on this kind of. It's funny that where we've not met face to face, we're chatting via a camera and then looking at text on the screen, but it does now feel like a real social interaction, which is
It is
nice.
becoming our new way of interacting socially. It's so true.
Yeah.
Okay, one last thing. A question was, with all your travels, have you ever found yourself in a dangerous situation?
Oh, I'm sure there's been lots. I don't have the best judgment.
Yeah.
Couple of offhand ones where I was wondering, Chatuchak Market in Bangkok, which is the world's biggest outdoor market. It's unfathomably huge, like thousands of stalls, like an acre just of pet fish, and then an acre of vintage furniture, that kind of thing. And we wandered all day until we found ourselves in an area with illegal cockfighting and people selling drugs and stuff. That didn't feel terribly safe. Um, you know, being in a room and then realizing that someone has a machine gun doesn't feel terribly safe
Yeah, an
either.
AK-47 there. I hear you.
um, Nothing, really, really, I've been in situations where I've gone out to shoot something knowing that there was a situation going on and then had it turn into a full on riot, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
and then some, wild animal type things, but nothing actually where I came home thinking, my God, I really almost died there. But I've certainly gotten into a few little incidents with security and police and that kind of thing, which in different parts of the world can be even scarier.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm less cavalier with it now. I really want to come home with the photo. I really want to take a few chances to experience something, but I'm not going to risk life and limb for a photo or a memory unless it's something exceptional. And I really shouldn't at all, I guess.
Yeah, good advice. Well, Matt, it's really been great to have you with us. Is there any final advice you want to leave viewers with, either about travel photography or photography in general?
Uh, well, I mean, that is such a big question. I should have
I
had
know.
something prepared for it.
Sorry.
Um, no, 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 don't be. I would say take your interactions with people as, a gift from the person that you're meeting. If you're in another country and someone, that's a good point. So
That
of
is good.
course you have to take this with a you have to modulate this with use your common sense, have a bit of street smarts. But early when I would travel, I would often be on the lookout for being conned. And I thought it was me being street smart and avoiding situations. But later in life, I'm finding I think that was actually me being kind of jaded and closed minded, and I missed a lot of opportunities. So now when I meet someone, if it feels safe and okay, and someone says, why don't you come back and have tea with us or come to dinner, and it's in a safe place, in a safe country, I'll almost always do it. Of course, you don't just jump without thinking, but some of my most memorable experiences traveling have been leaving and skipping, for example, going to see the Eiffel Tower and instead going with the family to their picnic. Those kind of opportunities to see a real cultural experience that isn't for tourists happen spontaneously because it is unprepared.
I totally agree. Excellent advice. Matt, it's been a pleasure to have you with us, looking at your incredible photography, your range, and your stories behind it. Anything else you want to leave people with before we sign off? News or how? Obviously,
Sure.
we'll put in the show notes where they can find your work.
hmm so thank you for the offer. I'm like you. I'm doing a couple of live shows each week. Every Friday, we're doing a little series called Beers and Photos, where I give a theme, and then the following week, I get people to submit their shots, and then we get together at 6 p.m. Eastern on a Friday, have a beer, and look at each other's shots. Something a bit similar to this.
Sure.
So that's going on each week, and that's just at mattgranger.com/live. Tonight we're talking about time-themed images, and next week I haven't decided the theme. So if you want to join us tonight, then
We'll
all the
put it
welcome. It's very
in the notes
casual.
here too, so you guys can get it. Well, great, Matt. Thanks again. Good luck.
Thank you for
Stay
having me.
safe, and we'll be in touch.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark.
You bet. Cheers. Don't go away, you guys. I got a couple of things to let you know about. So that was fantastic. We are so fortunate to have these remarkable photographers join us and get an inside look into their world of photography and how they capture these amazing photographs. Honestly, I really feel blessed at being able to invite them and have them tell us such incredible details about how they did this. So, on that note, will you guys do a couple of things? One, make sure you join our AYP club that I just formed really a few days ago. It's on a Facebook page. The point of it is to meet up and we're on these YouTube lives. This all goes away as soon as we turn off the camera, but you can head over to the Facebook page and stay connected with each other. So Jared will pop the link up there. One thing I'm going to do, something I used to do a long time ago, is I'm going to start giving photo assignments. I call it the Photo Dojo. And this week's assignment, I'll give it to you ahead of time, is to photograph something that you love, someone or something that you love. It could be your better half, it could be your dog or cat, it could be a piece of photographic equipment. Whatever it is, you want to photograph, so you don't have to go outside to do this. Put it up, and we'll all have a look at it. If people want critiques, they can indicate that. You don't have to get a critique if you don't want one, but if you do, you should say, hey, go ahead and critique me on this. So, Danny, I'm sorry that you're not on Facebook. We'll have to figure out some other way that you can join us. A couple other things. Tomorrow, Bob Holmes will be going up on the YouTube channel as a regular video. You can head over there and go to the show notes and leave your comments on that. And Jared will also, I believe, put up the link for that. This video that we just saw with Matt will go live on Monday. I'm sorry, on Sunday. Monday, we have a completely different schedule. I'm going to be interviewing Lauren Bath. She's in Australia. We couldn't make the time shift work for 10 a.m., so it's going to be 4 p.m., which is 9 a.m. her time on Tuesday. We're talking into the future, guys. How amazing is that? I'm going to be talking to her at 4 p.m. on Monday, and we're going to get answers from 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Lauren Bath is a phenomenal photographer. I want more women on this show. So we're breaking through with Lauren's going to be our first one. We'll get that off to you guys. So definitely tune in for that. Now, above and beyond that, look, we're connected. We're a group. I want to stay connected with you guys. Make sure you tell your friends about what we're doing here. Make sure you leave your comments and you subscribe, you like us. And it's more than just, a kind of a YouTube closing point. I really want to grow with you guys and get our work out to a lot more people. And that's going to come from you guys just sharing. That's really the key to that. So I don't think I've left anything else out. Maybe I have. Jared, this is our last moment. If you want to put anything on the chat, go ahead and do it. I love you guys. Stay well, stay safe, and remember to get out and capture your own images of life.